The Schengen Agreement on open borders within the European Union turns 40 this weekend. It's a cornerstone of EU policy and it allows the free movement of citizens and goods. But many member states are now reimposing temporary border checks as part of immigration controls, raising questions whether Schengen can survive. DW's Lucia Schulten has this report.
The freedom to travel through a Europe without borders, the Schengen Agreement was meant as another step towards unity. It dissolved borders with the aim of increasing political stability and economic prosperity. But 40 years later, Schengen is at a crossroads. The Schengen zone consists of nearly all EU member states, as well as Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Norway and Iceland. Once inside the zone, people can travel freely. More and more countries have introduced temporary border controls, many of them citing irregular migration, overburdened systems, or terrorism as the reason. Germany introduced temporary border checks on all of its 9 land borders last year, like here on the border to Luxembourg. And in May, the new conservative-led government took the controversial decision to turn back most asylum seekers at the border.
Since September, we've registered around 1,100 unauthorised entries. Of those, 700 people were sent back to Luxembourg. And since May, we've turned back 5 asylum seekers.
For some of the people who cross the Germany-Luxembourg border daily, the checks have added around 20 minutes to their commute. People have mixed feelings about the measures.
On the one hand, I understand it, but it means we're basically closing the border again.
And what do you think about that?
It's not that great.
I don't like losing 10 minutes, but it all makes sense.
It looks like it's a bit against the European spirit, because normally we shouldn't have any fixed, control like this one, right?
Migration expert Alberto Neithardt says the border checks are back for one main reason.
The reasons, however, are mostly political, in the sense that European governments are trying to send a message to their electorates that they are dealing with irregular movements within the Schengen area.
While controversial among member states, they are allowed under Schengen rules under certain conditions.
As things stand, member states can introduce border controls in their internal borders. This has to be within the framework of the rules that abide to that topic, and it has to be time limited.
But experts say they challenge the EU's core values.
Once border checks are established within the Schengen area, this has symbolic meaning because it evidently constitutes not only an obstacle to free movement within the area, but also it symbolizes how fragile unity among member states is.
With pressure over security and migration, 40 years on, the policy of open borders within the EU is facing its toughest challenge.
Jonas Bonneman is an assistant professor of European law at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. I asked him whether Schengen is effectively broken.
I don't think it's effectively broken. Many aspects of Schengen work really well. So think about the visa policy, think about the cooperation of member states with each other. So there's many things that actually work really well. But of course, the most visible part of Schengen does not work too well. So that's the abolition of internal border controls at internal borders. And we have seen many member states, or several member states, reintroducing border controls along their borders. And Germany is one of those states, the Netherlands as well, France as well. So this really calls into question one of the core promises of Schengen. And this promise is the abolition of border controls once we cross from one member state to another, to not be controlled, right? So not to have to wait in line until we will be waved through, but instead to really just experience Europe as an area of free travel, uninterrupted travel. So I think this is the one part that's really being called into question at the moment.
So can I ask you, of these internal EU border checks that you're talking about and that we're increasingly seeing these days, are they actually legal?
Well, that's a very relevant question at the moment. So the EU law is relatively clear that those controls should be temporary in nature. And then there are maximum limits of how long these controls could be maintained. But we've seen that several member states maintain those controls on a quasi-permanent basis. So that means that they exceed those limits. And here we can really ask ourselves, well, is this legal? And most of the colleagues, legal scholars, would say, no, it's not legal. Mm-hmm. What member states can do is to reintroduce controls to safeguard internal security, public order. So this is always possible. So if there is really an imminent threat to internal security, member states can reintroduce border controls. And this is the reasoning that some of the member states have used at the moment. So they say it is necessary for us to have these controls in place to ensure the safety and the security of the people in the country, right? So this is, in principle, an acceptable justification. But what we would really have to ask ourselves, okay, is what is that threat then? Is it really as bad? Is it as dire as the governments say it is? No? And many legal scholars would say probably not. Probably we are not experiencing such a dire situation.
So does that suggest that migration policy is in some cases becoming, a convenient excuse for border politics?
There seems to be a connection between the two. And we also see that some governments are actually linking the two. So they say, well, we see that asylum law doesn't work in Europe. So for that reason, we will reintroduce border controls to force the other member states to respect the obligations in migration law, specifically asylum law. So this connection between the two fields of law is increasingly made. No, but legally speaking, the two are distinct. No, but we do see that this is a trend in recent years to say, okay, because the asylum system in Europe doesn't work as it should be, we need internal border controls to compensate for that dysfunctionality.
Jonas Bornemann from the University of Groningen, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.